Hi, today I'll be speaking about my PCOS journey as someone in her 30s. Also, my decision to take Zepbound. So, I have been on Zepbound for just a month now. I finished 4 doses and I have seen some changes to my symptoms of PCOS, which I would touch during this video as well. Um, I will start with how I was diagnosed with PCOS and um, what the journey has been like. And just a caveat, I'm not a medical professional. This isn't medical advice. This is just, an overview of a journey and the steps I've taken so far. So, to start off, I was diagnosed pretty early in life with PCOS. I was diagnosed at the age of 15. I had what I believe a normal onset of menstruation a few years earlier, and then I was a pretty active child. Like I was in multiple you know teams, sport teams. Was really really like fit and healthy, and before being like really fit and healthy when I was younger, much younger, I was actually underweight because I was hyperactive as a child. So when I got diagnosed at 15, it was a bit of a shock, but at the same time, it wasn't truly out of the blue because it was the end of 10th grade for me, so high school, and um, I had actually spent a lot of time being under stress, preparing for examinations. Over the last 2 years, my activity had dropped drastically, and I had just been like eating, really unhealthy food. And even though my parents were regulating it at that point of time, I don't think that the whole, the cocktail of extreme stress over like examinations, doing well, and not having proper diet control because you are so stressed, kind of, attributed to this particular facet being, becoming pronounced. So I immediately started gaining weight, like around the end of ninth grade and all through 10th grade. And it was pretty noticeable around me because I had gone from a person who was very fit, kind of like, playing sports all the time to suddenly putting on weight. But it was even more debilitating because now I had suddenly not had my periods for a long time. And um, we got lucky with the fact that the gynac that helped us the very first time was able to just look at the symptoms and say that, hey, you've not had regular periods in a while. I think we should get you checked out for PCOS. And I had lab work done. They scanned my ovaries to check for cysts, and yeah, of course, they found it. And um, at that point of time, when I was 15, 16, it was really hard to really understand what it meant because this wasn't something that was talked about. This was in the year, I would like to say 2008. So it was it was pretty early, like, people weren't talking about it. And I did not understand the repercussions of it till I looked it up at that point in time. And they spoke about the risks of early onset of diabetes, insulin resistance, blood pressure, infertility, and all of those things just broke my heart. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be infertile my whole life. And now, years later, meeting people who have PCOS, and most of them have ended up conceiving. I know it's not true, but try telling a 16-year-old that. I was just going through it. So at that point of time, my gynac gave me an option to go on to birth control to at least regulate my periods. And it did help. It even helped with my acne a bit at that point of time. But to be honest, it was the worst experience. It didn't feel good to my body. And I've always been a person who believes that, hey, let's not try to throw medicines at everything. So how can I avoid this? So this was a conversation I ended up having with her, that, hey, what do I do? Because I don't want to stay on birth control. Like, this isn't an option for me right now. So she said that, hey, you gotta raise your activity levels again. And I was like, it sounds easy, but it wasn't. At the same time, around the same time, like while I was diagnosed with PCOS, I also was basically diagnosed with like gastrointestinal like intestinal issues, where basically food was getting jammed up in my stomach, so it would like make me heavish all the time. I think it's called gastroparalysis or something. And the person who did like took a look at my intestines and stuff, he said the same thing, you gotta lose weight. So I spent the next couple of years, like 16, 17, 18 onwards, being hyper focused on how do I end up losing weight. And with whatever tools I had at that point in time, I tried to increase my activity levels. But food was always a challenge, which comes with insulin resistance, where you can eat healthy, but you'll always have that, that craving for sweets, or you can get derailed pretty easily. So I spent a lot of my 20s while being healthy-ish. I was a size 6, but also like struggling with food and uh, not being able to manage correctly. So somewhat healthy. Um, the biggest change came towards the end of my 20s, where while my lab work's good, I'm super active, and food choices are, somewhat out there. My stress levels, due to working, increased drastically. And suddenly, a person who's been, gone from like a size 4 to a size 6 for a pretty long time, I suddenly became a size 8. And it was over the last few years of my 20s where I was just going through a lot. Like, there were some issues with my relationships. I started gaining like crazy, and suddenly I'm looking at weight in above 80 kgs. And it was the worst thing ever, because if you know anything about PCOS, like gaining weight is going to just make things harder. So I started to have really, really painful periods. And the more stressed I was because of work, or even because of not getting my periods, I would have even more painful periods. So I think at that point of time, I had to make a conscious decision, like coming into my 30s, that something needed to be changed. And it brought in a change of like, I started going to a nutritionist, and I started boxing, and I ended up doing boxing for 4 years with a nutritionist, in between for like 1.5 year. And I did see changes. I did learn how to sustain my body, because there's also a part that I had shifted and moved countries in my 20s. So now I was living in a new country with a completely different view, and basically a different, flora in terms of like food offered. And I had to even like learn like, okay, what are the proteins, what are the macros here. At the same time, I did not want to overdo it. I just wanted to eat sustainably and maintain my symptoms, and like not make things worse. So luckily, with that change, um, from my early 30s to where I am now, I've had super regular periods. My acne went away. I used to have horrible cystic acne. I still show some male pattern baldness, like in places, but it isn't like, I don't think it bothers me all that much, to be honest. Uh, I do have some skin tags, like I think, which they say are normal, but it doesn't really bother me either. What does bother me sometimes is the facial hair. So I don't get a lot of like crazy peach fuzz. I do have some, just because of like being a South Asian, um, and also having PCOS. But the biggest thing for me has been like the moment there are hormonal shifts, I start seeing like a bunch of chin hair, which are pretty coarse, to be honest. It's not, like really thin. And in my 20s, I had gotten laser for this particular area, and it might have helped, but I still have days where if my hormones fluctuate, I'll just have like a crop of little black hair, which, maybe doesn't show on camera, but I think face to face you could probably see it. But I just use threading right now for that, and it works out pretty fine. Acne, like I will have some acne from time to time, but nothing like crazy. So I do have blemishes, but I don't have like ton of like pimples or anything. But I did have those in my mid 20s still, and at that point of time, it looked like there was no end to that particular skin issue, but um, I think it cleared up towards me end of the 30s. So uh, there is some hope at the start of 30s, at least for like the pimples and all that. Now coming to the decision to take Zepbound. So I've always been since like I asked my gynac, to I don't want to use birth control. Pretty active. Like I go to the gym, I weight lift, I did boxing for a while. I've also done like half marathon, 5K. I used to swim like on and off in the winters quite a bit. So, and I can actually even walk a lot. But for some reason, like my weight was always like struggling with it. And even with the right food choices, maybe I could drop like 1 or 2 pounds. But it was nothing to really get me to a place where I was really satisfied with the the results I was seeing. And what changed for me was a trip earlier this year. I was traveling to in Amsterdam, and one of the people traveling with me, I noticed that she wasn't having the same food portions as us. And I'm a person who also has like pretty small food portions. I don't do the regular, American portions. It's pretty small for me. So there were places where I was eating more than her, and it kind of took me aback because I was like, we're in a pretty decent place with decent food, and why are you like not having it, the standard size or that standard portion size? And uh, she told me towards the end of the trip that she was on Monjaro, and it had helped her lose like close to 40 pounds. In my case, with my BMI and my height and just my lifestyle, I don't need a 40 pound or even a 20 pound, but I was looking for some sort of, way to cut this plateau and help me lose some more weight. So I felt like it was an impetus enough to, hey, let me try. Like, let's see what happens. And I came back and I spoke to like a GP here that, hey, I am interested in trying the drug. I don't know how much it's going to help me, to be honest, but can we, like give it a shot? And we discussed some of my symptoms of PCOS. I do have sleep apnea, so um, that also factored in. And she basically like went through my symptoms over the last few years, and she said we could start off with a pretty low dose of Zepbound for you, which is Zepbound 5 mg. And I said, yeah, let me try it. And I finished my first 4 injections. I take them in a week once, and I will be starting my second dose, like a second dose of 4 next week. One thing that my doctor told me upfront was that with a case like mine, where I've pretty healthy, making the right choices, pretty active, I wouldn't expect a lot of like crazy weight loss, but I would see like a 5 to 10 pounds. And I said, okay, that's still fine. That's what I'm looking for, because like at this point in time, I just want to see like how does it really help me. So coming to what have I seen in 1 month since I've taken Zepbound. So the very first time I took Zepbound, it was very noticeable for me, the difference in my appetite. As someone who was making an effort to be in a calorie deficit and eat healthy and still work out like with a trainer, I still noticed that I was able to wean off of coffee, like the morning coffee, and any sort of sweets. And this was huge for me, like really huge. So I'm not a person who needs to gorge on desserts on the daily, but you put a good tiramisu or put a good cake in front of me and I'm gonna have it. And while I wasn't doing it daily, I was doing it like every 2 or 3 days. After I started Zepbound, completely lost the appetite for that. Um, Even if like I was getting free cake at work and really tasty cake at work, I had absolutely no interest in eating it. And that was amazing for me because eating sugar, like the sugar cravings were probably the hardest part, where you're doing everything right that you can, but your own like internal, system is asking for the sugar. With Zepbound, I could completely cut that off, and not having coffee is really, really great. Like, especially when I take my doses, and towards the first few days after the doses, I feel I don't even need coffee. And while I slowly start to wean off of it, I can do it maybe half a cup of coffee, but it's not something where I need to have 2 to 3 cups. And there have been days in my 20s and even when I was first diagnosed where I could easily do like 4 to 5 cups of coffee. So I was just basically like stressing my body to the max. But I'm not doing that anymore. So there is an appetite change. I have noticed I've dropped like close to 2 pounds. It isn't a lot, but it makes my clothes fit better. And this is after like just the first 4 doses, so I'm pretty happy. I'm managing my expectations with the weight. The other thing I noticed was my period came a little earlier. So this year, because of like work stress and things like that, I was noticing that my standard duration, which I have been tracking for years now, had kind of expanded from like 28, 29 to 32 and 33 in some places. Now with Zepbound, it actually ended up coming pretty soon, and I'm actually like early by 2 weeks. And my read from that is that my hormones are starting to balance themselves out with losing all the stored fat. And I'm actually very, very curious over the next like 3 to 4 months that, hey, will I be able to come down from like the 33, 34 or 32 number to 28 and have like a standard cycle. So it's going to be pretty interesting. Apart from that, I've noticed I sleep better at night, and this is not just after the dose, just consistently. And I used to be a person who had like a very bad habit of snoring, but I don't think I snore anymore, or at least I'm not hearing myself snore, or nobody's giving me that feedback. So that's one of the great aspects, that I'm actually able to sleep through the night, but not only sleep through the night, hit close to like 7 to 8 to sometimes 9 hours. There is a side effect I would like to talk about that I have seen, is where when I started the dose, I think I took 2.5 the first time just to like get me started. After that, I moved to a 5, and when I shifted, that was the very first day I think I slept the whole day. And I think that's my body getting used to the just like the new hormones, or the change in like my calorie needs, that I was like super tired. So I still have that, like whenever I take my dose and say if it is off or increased even a little bit, I end up sleeping a lot, but it has become better. So I did take a dose today, and I did sleep for like 2 hours after, but I just took a pretty long walk and came back, and I'm chirpy, pretty chirpy and pretty aware. So just that's something to remember as well. Um, Apart from that, I just noticed that my appetite is still pretty much like diminished, and I'm not like carbs and all that don't draw me, but I do still like do crave like food from time to time, especially like at normal intervals. But I've been having close to like 2 meals for a while now, so it kind of helps me with that cycle as well. The one thing I want to highlight is how it affected my weightlifting. And the one thing I would say is that I definitely noticed that my lifts have become harder for me, because unless I really manage my protein intake well with Zepbound, there's a very high chance I'm losing more muscle mass than fat. So that has been something that I have to be like extremely cognizant about, because I've been weightlifting for, for a while now, like with a trainer, and he doesn't not know about the Zepbound aspect, but I don't want it to become so bad that I'm like regressing a lot with respect to what I used to be able to lift. So while I know there will be differences, I am making a very like active and cognizant decision to like get more proteins and fiber in, um, and just be very aware of that. So that'd be like my leeway to my final point, as my learning with Zepbound is that Zepbound will help you with PCOS. I'm seeing my cycle come early, I'm sleeping better, I have lost weight. But the one thing you have to be extremely cognizant about is there will be some tiredness, and you'll have to manage your food like very well. And this is the perfect time to exercise food hygiene. And I'm still learning it, but the fact that I can cut off like sugars and not have crazy cravings is really helping me even navigate that journey, um, and just go back to, hey, I want to be in a state of health, which is great, especially since I'm in my 30s. So I will be continuing with 5 mg for a while. I don't see myself going any higher, to be honest. I've already discussed this with my general practitioner, but the reason being is that while I can see this being a tool to manage PCOS long term, I also imagine a world where I can, potentially wean off of it. And especially, I would need to wean off of it for like pregnancy, etc. So, how do I create that net difference that I'm not having to play catch up after my pregnancy is a goal I'm trying to reach. So, I will keep everyone posted, or I will just post a video after my second dose of 4 to see how much weight I've lost, or things that I'm seeing as a difference from taking Zepbound. But with PCOS, bottom line is that I think taking such drugs can potentially help you, and also help you set systems that are healthy for you. So I would highly recommend it. And I do hear like people sometimes judging that, hey, you're not pre-diabetic or whatever, and why do you need such drugs? I don't think that they understand what having PCOS is like. And while it's not a diagnosed disease as such, it's a pretty debilitating condition to have. And I would not worry about that judgment, because we're going into a world where weight loss drugs are becoming more prevalent, and more so I even foresee it becoming more affordable over time. So if you can leverage it, there's nothing like it. I would also exercise caution where just because something has a 7 mg or a 15 mg available, it's not the best option. There should be always a part to wean off of things. But I think for any adult taking it, this is something that they'll have to navigate with their general practitioner or a doctor. So all the best on all your journeys. If this inspires you, great. Thank you so much. Bye.